High in the mountains of Scandinavia, 9 Norwegian paratroopers race through the cold, black night. They have just completed a successful raid on a remote Nazi-controlled hydroelectric plant, destroying over 1,000 pounds of a mysterious substance known as heavy water. The only thing the soldiers knew about heavy water was that if the Nazis got their hands on enough, they could create a weapon of unprecedented power. All around them, in Nazi-occupied Norway, their people were being persecuted and killed. Nevertheless, these commandos trekked over 60 miles, survived the Norwegian winter, and overcame incredible odds to execute the most successful sabotage mission of World War II and stop the Nazis from creating an atomic bomb. After the discovery of nuclear fission in 1938, the Nazi regime called upon Germany's top physicists to harness its power into a nuclear weapon. The physicists required heavy water, a form of water containing a hydrogen isotope, to facilitate nuclear fission. The only problem was that heavy water is almost non-existent in nature and takes massive amounts of energy to isolate. The only place on Earth that isolated heavy water in large quantities was the Vemork hydroelectric plant in Rjukan, Norway. The company that owned the plant, Norsk Hydro, primarily produced fertilizer, with the heavy water simply being a byproduct. When the Germans invaded Norway in the spring of 1940, the Nazis seized Vemork and all the heavy water produced within. Hitler was one step closer to the bomb. Leif Tronstad was a Norwegian military officer, renowned professor at the Norwegian Institute of Technology, and a successful scientist who had researched heavy water extensively. Tronstad had also worked at Vemork and was familiar with the plant's heavy water production. Following the Nazi invasion, Tronstad spent a year resisting the Nazi regime in Norway before eventually escaping to Britain, where he was put in charge of Company Linge, a commando unit of Norwegian refugees based in Britain. Company Linge's main goal was to carry out attacks and raids on German-controlled Norwegian land. Members of Company Linge were forced to sabotage Norwegian industry, raid their own cities, and destroy Norwegian homes, all in hopes of resisting the oppressive Nazi dictatorship. Then, in 1941, Leif Tronstad received information that the Nazis were going to use heavy water from Vemork to create nuclear weaponry. Tronstad knew that immediate action must be taken. Vemork had to be sabotaged and its supply of heavy water destroyed. On October 19, 1942, the 4 members of the mission's first phase, Operation Grouse, dropped onto the desolate Hardanger Plateau in central Norway. Norwegian commandos Jens Anton Poulsen, Arne Schjelstrup, Knut Haugland, and Klaus Hellberg made up the operation. These soldiers were to ski to Vemork and wait for 2 gliders, each containing 15 British combat engineers, to land at their location. The British troops, codenamed Operation Freshman, would then infiltrate the plant and destroy its heavy water with explosives. In order to remain undetected, the members of Grouse were dropped roughly 30 miles west of Vemork, a 2-day ski for the expert skiers. The winter of 1942 to 1943 is still the hardest winter on record in Norway. The terrible conditions slowed Operation Grouse's progress to a crawl, and their planned 2-day journey to Vemork took 15 days. On top of that, the 4 men had decided to leave half of their rations behind in order to keep their packs light. The team had to fight through grueling conditions, exhaustion, malnutrition, and the fear of being discovered. Finally, they arrived at a small, abandoned mountain cabin close to Vemork, where they were able to make radio contact back to London and tell Company Linge they were in position. Operation Freshman was a go. On the 19th of November, Freshman's captain ordered the British commandos to begin the mission despite poor weather conditions. The thick clouds and turbulent skies caused both gliders' radars to cut out. The pilots lost control and the gliders spiraled down towards the mountains below. Most of the troops were killed instantly by the crash. The few who survived were quickly located, tortured, and executed by the Gestapo. Operation Freshman had failed. Now, Company Linge had to scramble to launch a second sabotage attempt. In the meantime, the isolated Grouse team was left alone with no food and forced to survive through an unforgiving Norwegian winter. All the members of Grouse managed to endure in the mountains through the bitter cold and merciless blizzards. Hiding in their abandoned cabin, they were able to stave off starvation by eating wild moss and lichen and hunting reindeer. Their perseverance came from a place of patriotism and intense love for their home country. After 4 months, the men received a message from London. A 6-man Norwegian team, codenamed Operation Gunnerside, had been deployed onto the Hardanger Plateau. The Gunnerside team was led by Joachim Runeberg, with Knut Hauklid, Kasper Idland, Birger Stromsheim, Frederick Kaiser, and Hans Storhaug making up the other 5 members. With Haugland staying behind to provide updates to London, the other 9 resistance fighters prepared to infiltrate Vemork in 5 days' time. All 9 men knew the importance of the mission, but also understood the incredible difficulty and danger. Being located on a mountainside already provided Vemork with impressive natural defenses. However, since Operation Freshman's failure, the Germans suspected Vemork was being targeted. Troops were now stationed round the clock. Mines had been planted, and a barbed wire fence had been installed. The only entrance to the plant was a heavily guarded suspension bridge stretched across a 600-foot ravine. With all these factors in mind, all the members of Grouse and Gunnerside were well aware that their odds of survival were low. They knew this was likely a suicide mission, but failure was not an option. On February 28, 1943, just after midnight, the 9 commandos skied towards Vemork. Unable to infiltrate the plant via the bridge or mountainside, the commandos made the decision to descend the steep ravine, cross the icy river beneath, and climb back up the other side, cutting through the outer fence with a single pair of wire cutters. Once inside the complex, the saboteurs split up. Runeberg, Idland, Stromsheim, and Kaiser moved in as the demolition crew, as the other 5 members stayed near the on-site barracks to provide cover in case of a gunfight. During their training, members of both operations had memorized blueprints and layouts of Vemork. They knew every inch of the grounds and were able to arrive at the heavy water storage building undetected. From here, the demolition squad climbed through an open cable shaft to reach the cellar, where the heavy water was kept. Once inside, Runeberg and Stromsheim attached explosives to the heavy water containers. Once Runeberg lit the fuse, he and his men raced out of the cellar and back towards the barracks to rejoin their comrades. A muffled blast confirmed that the mission had been a success. As the Norwegians escaped into the night, half a year's supply of heavy water spilled out of its tank and down the drain in the basement floor. Not a single shot had been fired, and all 9 resistance fighters made it out alive. After the mission was completed, Runeberg led the other members of Gunnerside on a 150-mile ski to reach safety in Sweden, except for Knut Hauklid, who led another sabotage mission that sank the SF Hydra, a German ship set to carry the last of Vemork's heavy water to Germany. Afterward, Hauklid traveled to Oslo with Arne Skjelstrup to continue working with the Norwegian resistance. Leif Tronstad, the sabotage's mastermind, was tragically shot and killed by a Nazi sympathizer in 1945. He died protecting his country and his people. The German occupation was a dark time for Norway. Its land was invaded, its government was destroyed, and its citizens were oppressed and killed. Over the course of the war, the Nazis killed 10,000 Norwegians. The brave Norwegian soldiers of Grouse and Gunnerside managed to fight back against their captors, but they had to launch an attack on their own country to do so, as was the case for countless other Norwegian resistance movements. In pursuit of keeping the Nazis from a nuclear bomb, 30 men lost their lives. Finally, there is the matter of the atomic bomb itself. Even if the sabotage kept Hitler from winning the race to a nuclear weapon, the overarching tragedy is that anybody won that race at all.
I was told the operation was very important. If the Germans got hold of the heavy water, they would be able to blow up some part of London. I didn't believe him. I think you tell me this because you want us to do a good job.
It was only after the Allies dropped the nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki that the saboteurs understood what had been at stake during their mission. However, despite all the darkness surrounding the lives of the Norwegians during this time, the bright light of triumph and determination shines through in the actions of the patriots who risked their lives for the good of their people. The brilliance of Tronstad and Company Linge to devise the original plan. The perseverance of Grouse when all seemed hopeless. The heroics of Gunnerside to keep the Nazis from doing further harm to anyone. It was all a triumphant testament to the human spirit.